Welcome to DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. Here it is. Ravenloft: The Horrors Within has officially been released today as I put this out with its wide release. In this video, I'm going to give a quick overview, talk about what I like and don't like about the new Ravenloft book, answer some FAQs, and I'm also going to look back at my predictions from my theories video where I predicted what is this book going to include. Did I get any right? I guess we're going to see. A bit about me, just in case this is the first video of mine you're seeing. I was a player in Curse of Strahd, then DM'd Curse of Strahd, and for the last few years I've been running an almost weekly Ravenloft sequel campaign to Curse of Strahd. So I'm a big fan of Ravenloft and very interested in this book, and I have direct first-hand experience with running the Ravenloft setting. My players at this point have been to about a dozen different domains of dread. A few disclaimers before I begin. I'm not going to cover everything in depth. In fact, this is more of a sort of DM-focused overview review than a player-focused one. Sorry, players. Therefore, I'm not going to focus on the player options in Chapter 1 too much. I imagine 90% of other D&D YouTubers will focus on those, and honestly, will probably do a better job than I will and do it justice. And granted, it's important that DMs know how or if the Dhampir Reborn Hex Blood have changed and what the new one, Lupin, is like, for example, but I won't be covering that in this video. I'm also not going to go deep into stat blocks in this video for monsters or for Dark Lords. I will mention a few, such as I think I'm going to do a comparison of what was suggested for Vladesca in Van Richten's guide, the previous Ravenloft book, and this one. But I'm not going to go too deep. Not in this video. I am going to do future videos where I talk about new monsters and some of the other stat blocks, maybe go over the Dark Lord stat blocks. This video is more about the meat in the middle, the lore and the tools for DMs for creating one-shots and campaigns in the Ravenloft setting. Also, no paid promo, wasn't given a free copy to review or anything like that, I bought it myself. And also, I'm going to be careful how much I show. I did reach out for Hasbro's PR team for guidance on how much of the book and its contents I could show. I actually got in touch with them twice, no reply. But I've read horror stories, no pun intended, of YouTubers getting a copyright strike for showing too much content from a new book. So I'm going to play it safe and mostly show images that have already been made public. Let's start with a quick overview of the book chapter by chapter. So there's an introduction. Introduction is called Domains of Dread, explains how to use the book, gives intro info about the dark powers, the Domains of Dread, Dark Lords, for example, sort of the rules of Ravenloft, what makes Ravenloft what it is, how it operates and things like that. There's information about mist travel between the different Domains of Dread. There's an adventures by level table and a pronunciation table. Both of those are great. I'm going to talk more about them later. Chapter 1, character options. All the player options, creating characters, new subclasses in terms of 5.5e, backgrounds, species, feats / dark gifts. Some of which are new, not just new for 5.5e, they weren't in Van Richten's guide either, so they are entirely new. Like I said, I'm not going to cover that in this video, sorry. I will quickly talk about Lupin. It's one of the new lineages, or species, sorry, they call it species now, not a lineage. It's essentially, I thought it would be basically the werewolf version for player characters, and it sort of is, but it's almost as if you're like stuck as a werewolf and can't transform back, so you're like permanently a werewolf. I kind of see it as the sort of lycanthropy's version of being a Dhampir, because a Dhampir is kind of like the in-between state. You're not quite a vampire, you're like half vampire. It's sort of similar to that. Chapter 2, Domains of Ravenloft. There's a small intro and then deep dives into the various domains and Dark Lords, Strahd and Barovia, Vladesca and Folkovnia, and so on. Very similar to Van Richten's guide. And then at the end, there's an other Domains of Dread section, like we had in Van Richten's guide, where some domains are just given small, paragraph-long write-ups. Chapter 3, Ravenloft Adventures. This is advice for how to craft campaigns in the Mist, how to use domains and Dark Lords effectively. There's an enemies and allies section. For example, it gives examples of Mist Wanderer NPCs. They're sort of like good NPCs who can help the characters. Information about horror atmosphere, horror role-playing, and then the Haunted Bastion options. Chapter 4, Creating Domains of Dread. How to create your own, plus genres of horror. Body horror, cosmic horror, dark fantasy, and then various ideas and options for each of those settings, locations, adventure ideas, monsters you can include. Chapter 5, Denizens of the Mists. Info on horror monsters, plus all the stat blocks. And then the appendix, all about the Tarokka deck, what it is, how it works, how to do a reading, and the meanings of the cards. Okay, I'm going to talk through what I like about this book. I really like now, and a lot of this will be kind of thinking comparatively to Van Richten's guide, which only came out 5 years ago. And like a lot of people, and you know, I'm a big fan of Ravenloft and I'm biased. I was surprised they put this book out when they have done, you know, another new Ravenloft book. Just 5 years sounds like a long time ago, but in the grand scheme of things and all the settings there are in D&D, to get another Ravenloft book this soon was, you know, I shouldn't complain, but it was a bit unusual. But there's obviously good stuff in this book that wasn't in Van Richten's guide. The Adventures by Level section. So this is great. You've got, for one-shots, covering pretty much every domain in the major domain section, if you will, where they've got the big write-ups. Each one has, you know, an adventure. Some have two. I think Barovia has two. You know, and the adventure by level table tells you what levels they are. So it's kind of reminds me of things like Candlekeep Mysteries, Keys from the Golden Vault, Journeys through the Radiant Citadels, those kind of anthology adventures where you can sort of do it as one campaign and each adventure is each level, or you can run them as one-shots. Although, unlike those, it doesn't really give you information, unless I missed it, on how to sort of string them together from start to finish. So you'd kind of have to fill those gaps yourself as the DM. I think in this video, I'm going to use Folkovnia as an example, mainly because I've run Folkovnia. It was one of my earliest videos, and it's one of my most popular domain videos. I think it's second to the Carnival. So the adventure in Folkovnia is the Siege of Lakar. I should explain what Folkovnia is for those who don't know. So Folkovnia is the domain of dread, where it's kind of like recurring zombie sieges. Once a month, tons of zombies flood into the domain, and the denizens of the domain are just trying desperately to fight them off so they're not all killed by zombies, basically. Lakar is the main city in one of the last sort of holdouts from the zombie sieges. And what's great about this is, although there was information on how to run the sort of Siege of Lakar in Van Richten's guide, we have a map, we have a fully fleshed adventure for level 9 characters. You know, it talks about what happens during the rounds of combat, what kinds of monsters to include, and then there's sort of a plot twist where it turns out that Vladeska, the Dark Lord's plan, is to sacrifice this area and do a huge explosion to wipe out a bunch of the zombies. And the players have the opportunity to sort of stop that if they figure out, oh, there's this massive wagon full of gunpowder and some of our soldiers should be helping us fighting, seem to be lighting it, kind of thing. I think that's great. And it helps you to sort of think, right, you know, you can run that as is, using its suggestions for your players, and you can add to it. It doesn't talk about this, but there's also a map for her base. So after they've discovered it, you could have them then fight Vladeska afterwards and say, and that's how the domain wraps up, maybe, and how that campaign, if you're running sort of just a Folkovnia focus campaign. There's also campaign arc suggestions for each domain. So again, looking at Folkovnia, so it kind of gives suggestions based on levels. So levels 1 to 4, maybe they rescue a group of commoners from zombies, and that gets Vladeska's attention. She recruits them into fighting the zombies and the zombie sieges. Levels 5 to 8, they start to witness and see the suffering of the people of Lakar, people who are impaled for their disloyalty. And maybe they meet some rebels who want to overthrow Vladeska. And levels 9 to 12, that's when there's the zombie siege. For example, the adventure it suggests. As I said, you could have it where they fight Vladeska at the end of it. So that's great. In Van Richten's guide, we didn't really have something that said, run this for these levels. And it's great that we've got that in this, and kind of helps DMs to think, gives a clearer and better idea of how to run a campaign in each domain. I really like the art in this book. It's better than Van Richten's guide art. I think the art in Van Richten's guide was good, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that was bad and this is good, but I think this is better. It's grislier. I think one of the criticisms of Van Richten's guide is people worried that it was not horror enough. It wasn't grisly enough. But my gosh, some of the art in this book is super grisly. The one that brings to mind is the guy who's literally having his head sliced off as he's just going for a stroll in wherever it is. And there's the Doulahan and the Death's Heads. Brilliant. I know some people don't like the neon. I like it. I think it's cool. I think it's different. I think it's nice to have something different. Some people might argue horror should be like black and white or darker colors, but I don't know. I think it's good to have something a bit different rather than more of the same. But I know it's obviously a matter of taste for some people. We've got more maps. We had domain maps in Van Richten's guide, which have been redone for many domains, such as Folkovnia. But now we've got maps of towns and areas. We've got Mordantshire in Mordant. We've got the city of Matira Bay in Darkon. And areas such as Shadowborn Manor in the Shadowlands, Castle Avernus in Darkon, and of course, like I said, the Gate of Lakar in Folkovnia. Some of them seem to honor the old designs as well. Van Richten's shop, for example, years ago there was a Dragon magazine release talking about the shop, and there was a picture of it, some art. And when I created the map a few years ago, I modeled it on that. And you can see that the designers of this have modeled it as well. The living room is pretty much a match for that picture and similar to the one that I did. Dark Lords have stat blocks. That's great. It was a major criticism of Van Richten's guide, which just said, use the noble stat block for this person, or use the knight stat block for Vladeska, for example. I didn't mind too much because I tweaked and customized them anyway to make them unique and special, just using those as a sort of starting point and a base. But it's good that it does the work for you, and it's doing them justice as well. You know, these are supposed to be iconic villains. Just using the knight stat block with a tweak or two may not be great, but having them, they've got their own dedicated abilities, feels more Dark Lordy. So I use Vladeska as an example. The Knight stat block, which is what was suggested in Van Richten's guide. Challenge rating 3. I suppose that's not too bad if you're running a low-level adventure and you just want you don't want a boss that'll absolutely annihilate them. Plus you imagine she'd have minions in the forms of her talons. And, multi-attack with sword, crossbow, and the parry reaction. And that's pretty much it. Vladeska in The Horrors Within. In addition to stuff like legendary resistances, she's got a pike she uses as her main weapon, impaling spear. She can impale a creature and then it has the restrain condition, taking piercing damage at the start of their turns. Artillery fire once a day. Each creature in a 20-foot radius, 60-foot high cylinder centered on a point Vladeska can see within 300 feet to take bludgeon damage and fire damage. And the target has the prone condition, half damage on a success. Reactions, redirect attack. So it's kind of similar to parry, but if someone makes an attack roll against her, she chooses them to fight or hit somebody else. And she has the legendary actions as well. All good Dark Lords should have legendary actions, I feel. Advance, moves up to half a speed, 1 pike attack. Dreadful Impaling, makes an impaling spear attack, but can also do the frighten condition. Order Ballista, takes a huge amount of piercing damage and their speed is halved. So that has just got so much more flavor and different to Knight stat block. And then give her a few minions who could just be the Knight stat block. Use Knight stat block for Talons. Use those stat blocks for those guys, and then obviously Vladeska's got her own. I've not seen many other people talk about this, but each domain has a domain effects section. In the case of Volkovnia, the section is called Drakov's Domain. And one of the parts is about closing the borders. That's nothing new, and it's kind of standard fare for Dark Lords and domains. But Drakov's allies have advantage on wisdom saving throws, and when someone finishes a long rest in Volkovnia, roll a d20, and on a 1, not only do they not recover any exhaustion, they gain exhaustion. Stuff like that. And each domain of the major list, not the other domains of Dread section, has this. And I think there's great sort of flavor for each domain. And as far as I'm aware, that's new for this book, not Van Richten's guide. I think it works really well, and it's a really cool idea. My next point is that the Ravenloft Adventures chapter is really in depth. It covers some stuff that was in Van Richten's guide, but there's more from what I can tell. Dark Lord's Goals gives loads of suggestions of what Dark Lords might want to achieve. Are they trying to escape their domain of dread, thinking of somebody like Azalin who desperately wants to? Or do they want to claim a new role, defend the status quo, or just relieve boredom? There's a meeting the Dark Lord section. Is the Dark Lord hiring the characters for a quest? Or is the Dark Lord in the process of committing a crime and the players spot them? Or are they having a decadent or horrible meal? All this stuff is not just handy for making your own Domain of Dread and Dark Lord, but stuff to think about with Strahd and Vladeska and Hazlitt and so on. Dark Lord gifts. I believe this is also new. These are like charms or supernatural gifts granted by the Dark Lord. One example is Mark of the Dread Lord. The player can cast the Fear spell once a day. There's more Tarokka mechanics. One thing I thought was quite interesting, it was like almost like a missed opportunity with Tarokka, is it's a huge part of Curse of Strahd. But beyond that, there's not much more. And obviously they've released this new Tarokka deck. We have the old Tarokka deck, which I still have. Now there's a whole appendix section, tells you how to do a reading, and it's different to the one in Curse of Strahd. It's supposed to help to give ideas for a campaign, or maybe stuff that happens within a domain. There's a focus card, a past, the opposition, the future, and the aid card. There's a separate D&D Beyond post I found that kind of talks more about how to craft and create encounters based on this. I'll include a link in the description. I think that's a handy accompaniment to the book and everything in the book as well. Each major domain has an aligned card and an opposed card. Again, using Volkovnia as an example, the aligned card is Dictator. Makes sense. the opposed card, Executioner. And in the Dark Lords and the Tarokka section in the beginning of chapter 2, it explains that if the players are traveling the mists and they draw the Dictator card in this example, it leads them to Folkovnia. And if they're in a domain and they draw the opposed card, in this case, they draw the Executioner card while they're in Folkovnia, then Vladeska, or the Dark Lord, in this case Vladeska, can not only sort of see and hear what's going on, but can also talk through that player. It could be a great thing where if they do a Tarokka reading when they're hanging out with the rebels, and Vladeska's like, I see what you're up to now, and sort of knows that they are planning to uprise against her, that kind of thing. So stuff like that could be really cool. This is probably a silly thing. This is one of the last things I'll talk about in the stuff I like section. There's a special thanks in the credits. I know it's a bit sad to be saying, I really like the credits and the special thanks in this book. But as a Ravenloft fan, it's kind of warm feeling in my heart that they say special thanks to a bunch of old writers and contributors to Ravenloft over the years. I recognize a bunch of names. William W. Connors worked on Shadowlands. Christy Golden wrote 3 Ravenloft novels. I believe she invented Jan the Sunstar. Lauren Tracy Hickman, who invented Strahd. James Lauder, who wrote the 2 Soth Ravenloft novels. John W. Mangrum and Steve Miller, who I think both created Carnival and probably worked on other stuff as well. Lisa Smedman, who worked on some adventures. And not only that, but it thanks the Fraternity of Shadows and the Cargatane. These are 2 sort of like fan communities, you know, where people have just like, Fraternity of Shadows have the Mystopedia website, which has been a godsend for my campaign, detailing all the information from pre-5th edition Ravenloft. It's just really good to see this recognition being given, as if Wizards of the Coast and the people involved in making this book are like saying thank you to the people who've come before, thank you for creating Ravenloft, and to the fans as well, thank you for keeping the torch alight and keeping on wandering through the mists or whatever. And lastly, there's a pronunciation guide. It's funny, I think it was Wild Beyond the Witchlight was the next book they released after Van Richten's guide, where that includes a pronunciation table, and then I think it can kind of become a standard thing in D&D books from that point onwards, but there wasn't one in Van Richten's guide, and I was there like, oh gosh, how do you pronounce half of these domain names and people? I feel quite validated as well, because Daemonliu, I always pronounced it Daemonliu, but then I saw everyone else pronouncing it Daemonlu, and I was like, I'm saying it wrong, but no, it says it's Daemonliu, I was right, hooray! There's pronunciation guides for the Shadowlands and the Sea of Sorrows. I think that's a bit overkill. I don't know how and why you'd need to know how to pronounce the Shaydowlands. And I'm sad to see that I was wrong about Valachan. It is actually Valakan. I talked about this in the beginning of my How I Run Valakan video. I should say it properly now. Where I said I didn't know if it was Valakan or Valachan and said it was Valachan, but it's actually Valakan. Boo. Okay, I'm going to talk about the stuff I didn't like about this book, or I think that would be off-putting for people wanting to buy it. There's a lot of info repeated from Richten's guide. I think this is to be expected, because it's kind of like, this is the 5.5e version of Ravenloft. And this could be somebody's first interaction with Ravenloft in D&D. You think of someone who's brand new to D&D and they've got the 5.5e books, it's making it compatible with that. And let's look at Folkovnia as an example. The story, I think it's Drakov's Tale is a section, is pretty much almost identical. I actually used a tool to check the difference between that text in Van Richten's guide and the text in Horrors Within, and it's 75-80% match. So it's pretty much, other than a few tweaks and adjustments, it's pretty much a copy-paste. And also, except for the stuff I said that's good, like the domain elements and the adventure idea and the campaign arc, there's not a huge amount beyond Folkovnia in Van Richten's guide that is new. I ran Folkovnia a few years ago, and I was going through it and I was thinking, well, this is kind of stuff that I already knew. Or, for example, I think it mentions a zombie beholder, which I don't think Van Richten's guide does, but it's kind of an obvious thing. When I was running it, I thought, let's find all the zombie monsters and put them in. So it was nothing in there that when I was reading through it made me think, wow, I would run it so much differently now if I ran it again. I'm a bit disappointed they didn't do more expanded domains beyond the Shadowlands. So Innsmouth and Sithicus are new. Shadowlands was a minor domain, as in other domains of Dread section in Van Richten's guide, and now it's got a few pages. What's amazing is I was actually running the Shadowlands and still running the Shadowlands when this book got announced. So it's quite funny how that's kind of been given a glow up when I was running it based on the small amount of information and using sort of fan-made sources. It's a shame, in my opinion, that this wasn't expanded out to other domains. Domains like Forlorn, the Sea of Sorrows, and Souronier have so much potential to have been a few pages long write up with their own domain map. Suronia, maybe not so much because it's zombies and a necromancer. There's probably a bit of overlap there with Forkovnia, maybe Darkon with Azalin and his undead. But Forlorn, it was really unique. I ran Forlorn, it was great. And the Sea of Sorrows is fantastic as well. Some people might argue, do we need a version 2 or essentially a reprint of Forkovnia, Hazlan, or Tempest? Fans of Forkovnia, Hazlan, and Tempest will say yes, but it's a funny one because if this is somebody's first touch point with Ravenloft and they didn't cover things like Forkovnia, Hazlan, and Tempest, which are arguably strong domains with a lot of potential, then they might miss out on that. And they might not think to buy Van Richten's Guide. Or there could be an argument for somebody who's gets into Ravenloft through Horrors Within to think, well, actually, we'll buy Van Richten's Guide as well. I also still feel like it's still lacking on the Maker campaign front. It does more than Van Richten's Guide, admittedly, and it does a better job on that front. But there's still a lot of work for the DM to do themselves. Yeah, like I said, there's an adventure by levels table. It's great for if you want to run certain one-shots for certain levels. But if you wanted to string it together as a domain hopping campaign type thing, there's still a lot of work to do. Less so than Van Richten's Guide, but still a lot. I mentioned this in a recent video. I still think that DMs want a Curse of Strahd for Ravenloft type adventure. So Curse of Strahd, each chapter is a different location in Barovia, and you go around the map. Something like that, where each chapter is a different domain of dread, which I guess is sort of in this, but sort of more fully fleshed out. I did see somebody say, oh, wouldn't it be great to have like a Curse of Strahd for every different domain of dread? I mean, that would be amazing. 250 pages for Forkovnia, 250 pages for Darkon, for example. But I don't think we'd ever see something like that. Okay, so those were my highlights and lowlights. And now I'm going to move on to sort of like an FAQ. So questions I can imagine people asking about this book. Is it a replacement for Van Richten's Guide? Well, yes, it is, sort of, kind of. It's the 5.5e version, 2024 version, whereas Van Richten's Guide was the 2014 original 5e version. It's an extension of / a replacement for Van Richten's Guide. Obviously, we got new stuff now, like Shadowlands is expanded, plus Innsmouth and Sithicus. But if you buy this and really want to run the Carnival, for example, you're probably going to have to buy Van Richten's Guide, because that's where the information for the Carnival lives. The Carnival kind of got downgraded to the Other Domains of Dread section in this new book. Same with ECATH as well. Is it better than Van Richten's Guide? Well, it depends. I arguably, yes. I think it depends on your goal, really. If you want to run a Ravenloft campaign, if you want to run adventures, if you want more maps, absolutely. Should you get it if you already have Van Richten's Guide? Again, that depends. I'm a huge Ravenloft fan. I couldn't not get this book, you know? I was going to buy it anyway. Even though, arguably, I still run a 2014 game, and we're nearing the end of our domain hopping campaign as well. We're in the Shadowlands, might do Darkon, might do one or two other places, then it ends. I maybe didn't really need this book, but, you know, I'm a Ravenloft fan. I was curious to know what would be in it. You know, there's still handy stuff like Shadowlands. I was considering doing Sithicus as well. So now there's a Sithicus chapter as well, Sithicus section. But if you are running a 2014 game and you are only running a few domains and they're all the ones that are already covered in Van Richten's Guide, and you're quite confident as well at homebrewing, you don't really need like the campaign arc info and the different adventures, or you like using your own map, stuff like that, then arguably no, you probably don't need this book. Is it useful for Curse of Strahd DMs? Well, again, if you're a Curse of Strahd obsessive, you might want to buy it because it does contain information about Strahd and Barovia, but it is stuff that would also appear in Curse of Strahd, like information about the domain, information about Strahd. That all lives in Curse of Strahd already. Obviously, there's things like additional adventure ideas, and there's new monsters like the Strahd Skeleton. You might want to throw Strahd Skeletons at your players, add them into Curse of Strahd. Well, you could do that if you get this book. Okay, I'm excited about this. This is time to look back at my predictions in my recent theories video and see how many I got right and wrong. There were 6 of them. Well, there was a 7th, but I didn't count it because it was kind of quashed before the book came out. My first prediction was that there'll be information in the book, maybe adventure ideas, about the domains of dread being at war with each other. This is based on older editions of Ravenloft where Azalin of Darkon and Strahd of Barovia, for example, used to fight and war against each other. I was correct-ish. I'm giving myself a half point here. So in chapter 3, it talks about the core and clusters as a model. You could run Ravenloft as isolated domains of dread, pocket domains that live in the mist and they're all separate from each other, or you could treat them as sort of countries on a map, and therefore there's a domain and there's, you know, Darkon is north of it, Valakan is to the west of it, something is to the south of it, and so on. But I'm giving myself a half point because I envisaged it to be a full-on adventure idea. For example, Strahd is sending minions out to different domains of dread, and it's just one line as a suggestion. So I feel like giving myself a full point there is kind of rude. Number 2, will we see a return of the core? Yes, I got this right. I can't believe it. So as I mentioned, the core was from older editions of Ravenloft, and I said it wouldn't necessarily be a replacement or a retcon, but it would be a suggestion that, oh, you might want to consider a core in Ravenloft, which is what I did as a sort of hybrid. So I used the information Van Richten's guide where all the domains are sort of separate and isolated, but then they can sort of be mapped. And so I'm kind of like an in-between solution. And this book is suggesting, you could do that. And it cites some of the old Ravenloft resources that did that. So, and it was exactly how I suggested, that it would be a suggestion, not a retcon. So I got that one right. Dark Lord bases as bastions. So bastions are new as a 5.5e. They are bases for the players. I knew there'd be bastion related content in this. And I said, is it going to sort of suggest that when the players sort of defeat a Dark Lord in a domain, they can take over that Dark Lord's base and have it as a bastion? No, I got this one wrong. The Shadowlands section does mention bastions, and it talks about how if you help out the members of the Circle, who are the sort of questing knights, they might give you a bastion. But they don't say it's going to be Shadowborn Manor, for example, which is the base of Ebonbane, the Dark Lord of the Shadowlands, or anything about, say, taking over Castle Ravenloft in Barovia, or Vladeska's base, I've forgotten the name of it, it's not on my notes, for Kovnia. Obviously, there's nothing stopping players wanting to do that, but it's kind of a homebrew thing. It's not, explicitly said that it could be done in the book. Number 4 was 5.5e Curse of Strahd monsters. I wondered if they were going to update the Curse of Strahd unique and specific stat blocks for 5.5e and add them to this book. I was wrong. It does have Esmeralda, Van Richten, Madame Eva, but I'm not counting those because they were already announced in advance. My theory was it would be things like the Barovian Witch or Rahadin, Babada Saga, people like that. I do wonder if at some point they're going to do sort of a 5.5e Curse of Strahd pack where those stat blocks are updated and they're either added to Curse of Strahd if you buy it, say, on D&D Beyond, or maybe for people who already own it, it's like a $5 one-off cost or something and you get those stat blocks. I'm surprised they haven't done something like that already. It's curious to know if it's one of those things you just haven't thought to do, or if it's something they're still working on and it is in the pipeline, they'll do it at some point. Number 5, this was my silly suggestion. Is there a Blob of Annihilation mentioned in the book? And the answer is yes! I was delighted when I saw this. I was laughing my head off. So the Blob of Annihilation is a high challenge rating monster that's new as of 5.5e. It wasn't in, the original monster manual. It's a new monster in the 2024 monster manual. And I wondered if there would be in the Innsmouth chapter, an adventure suggestion would be that Cthulhu fights a Blob of Annihilation and you have this Godzilla type standoff and the players are in the middle of it, or for example, or if they got to try and help one defeat the other. That doesn't happen. But in Chapter 4, Creating Domains of Dread, Genres of Horror, Cosmic Horror Monsters, the highest challenge rating suggestion in that table is a Blob of Annihilation. And yes, I'm going to do that effect with every time I mention it in a video. I'm sorry, not sorry. And I did say the criteria was it would just be one mention in the book. It didn't have to be that adventure mention. I was just hoping that it'd be mentioned in the book somewhere, somehow. So that counts. Give myself a full point for that one. And number 6, a new Curse of Strahd style Tarokka mechanic. I'm giving myself a half point here. I'm correct-ish. Because some of the cards lead to different domains of dread, but not all of them. So I should explain, sorry. Curse of Strahd, the Tarokka cards can lead the players to different MacGuffins that can help them defeat Strahd, a fated ally, things like that. I wondered if there would be some sort of bigger campaign-wide element where cards could lead people to domains and Dark Lords. And it does. You draw the Dark Lord card when you're navigating the mists, it might drag you to Barovia, for example. But it's not a full-on mechanic, and I don't think they've got everything like every card, for example. It's just certain cards. I'm going to plug something of my own here. A couple of years ago, I released something called the Second Tarokka Reading. This is like Madame Eva's reading in Curse of Strahd, but for the wider Domains of Dread and more for a wider Ravenloft campaign, similar to what they've done in The Horrors Within, where certain cards can lead you to Domains of Dread. I've done it with the whole pack. It's all the domains listed in Van Richten's guide. I'm considering doing a version 2 that, It also adds things like Innsmouth and Sithicus. I guess we'll see. But if you want something that's fully fleshed out and, you know, the players have this reading and it leads them to different domains of dread, similar to what's suggested in the Horrors Within, you might want to check that out. So out of those 6, I got 3. 2 plus 2 half points. 3 out of 6. I did better when I did this with Heir of Strahd. I did a similar thing with the Heir of Strahd novel last year. I had 4 predictions. I got all 4 of them right. But I'm happy to get 3 out of 6. I honestly thought I'd get 1 or maybe even 0. So happy to get 3 out of 6. That's it for this one. What did you think? What do you think of the book? Have you got it yet? Have you had a look? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I have got a lot of the Horrors Within videos planned off the back of this. I'm going to do some that tie into Curse of Strahd. I'm going to do some more general ones about Ravenloft. Like I said, I'm going to dig deeper into the stat blocks for Dark Lords, the new stat blocks for monsters, and so on. I might do domains revisited. So I know I said that with like Volkovnia, there's only so much information given, but I've already done a Volkovnia video, but obviously that's old, and I could do sort of a version 2 where I talk more about it using the information from Horrors Within. I'm also going to do a live stream this weekend as I put this video out. Saturday, 20th of June, 8 p.m. my time. I live in the UK, BST, British Summertime. That's 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, midday Pacific. I am going to talk about the book. I'm hoping to have my hard copy version at that point. At the moment, I'm just referencing it on DMD Beyond as I record this, and talk about it some more. And maybe you can ask me questions based on this review video. Maybe the stuff I didn't cover in this review video that you wish I had, we can chat about it in the live stream. Also, I have a membership. It's a bit like Patreon, but it's YouTube's own thing. If you want to support me, I'd really appreciate it. There's a sort of tier where you just get badges and emoji, and it's kind of like you get on Kickstarter. It's like you contribute a small amount. It's like, thank you. But if you can afford a bit more, there's members only videos where I talk about behind the scenes stuff about the channel. There's member first videos. Member has had access to this video about a day earlier than everyone else, and I try and do that with as many videos as possible. You get discounts on my DMsGuild products. I've got 3 Tarokka-themed DMsGuild products. The Second Tarokka Reading I mentioned earlier, you can get at half price. And there's a whole bunch of other perks as well. I'm probably going to introduce more perks in the future, more tiers, that include things like, you know, help with your campaign. Might be like a sort of monthly check-in or one-on-one help if you need help. Shout-outs in videos, stuff like that. And we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for watching.